Ghost moves his arms with force, breaking the neck of the last soldier and letting his body fall to the ground with a thud. Looking around, he observed the fallen bodies of army soldiers. Chris adjusted his tactical vest, moving away from the free-fallen bodies near his feet. Jill emerged from the forest, putting a few bullets in her sniper rifle into one of the pockets of the tactical vest. Accompanying her was the pilot and co-pilot, who looked a little weaker before more than tired. He needed urgent medical treatment. Looking away, he saw Hunk and his team approaching in a fast pace. They looked fine, apart from a few injuries here and there. Hunk had a bandage over his shoulder. Parker had a bandage over his head and was limping a little. The two BSAA medical soldiers were walking with the two remaining orphans, who had a few scratches, were dirty, and some of their clothes were torn. "Look who it is! I was beginning to think I was fighting alone," Ghost joked as Hunk approached. They both greeted each other briefly. "I decided to take this scenic route. Enjoy the view. I knew you can handle it," Hunk said, and the two soldiers watched as the group came again, and then the medical team immediately checked on their injured co-pilot. That was close," Hunk said, nodding at the piece of metal embedded into the co-pilot's chest. "Yeah, he'll be fine if we were quick. Speaking of which," Ghost said, turning and walking towards the huge helicopter ahead. Hunk followed. Just before entering the helicopter, Ghost turned around at his partner and nodded. Opening the helicopter's side door, he quickly climbed in, checking for any threat that he could hide inside. His eyes quickly scanned inside the vehicle. There was nothing but a few medical kits scattered around, some weapons onto the side walls, and a laptop on one of the seats. "Clear," Hunk said, after checking the cabin, then turned around, approaching Ghost, who was turning on the laptop. There were some files open, and somewhat familiar symbol. Russian soldiers by technology, soldiers and the present security service, Ghost said, turning this laptop screen to Hunk, who just snorted. "So the president of Russia himself hired a mercy to kill you? You're famous," Hunk said. Ghost shrugged. "I have this habit. It's my personal charm," Ghost said, and Hunk snorted in duration, walking towards the cabin opening the back of the helicopter. The rear ramp descended slowly, and the medical team carefully loaded the wounded soldier into the helicopter, placing an arm on the ground a few steps from the cabin. Chris was next to enter the vehicle, followed by Jill, who accompanied Parker. Parker refused the woman's help and sat down a few steps on the side of Hunk, grunting slightly in pain and muttering that his pride had been hurt enough for one day. "Good to see that you're alive, Parker," Ghost said, closing his laptop again and putting it to one side. He could give the device to Alia when they had arrived. "Almost forgot, but it's good to see your mask again," he sighed, grunting once again as he moved his injured leg. Unfortunately, they didn't have any extra herbal mixture. "So remember the time I asked if you were ugly and when you said you wouldn't take your mask off?" the man asked. Ghost looked at him with certain curiosity. Parker, for his part, raised his arm and threw it down, as if telling him to throw the memory away. "Forget I asked that. If I ever get a girlfriend, remind me not to show her to you," he said. Ghost laughed softly, shaking his head at the man's good humor. "By the way, sorry to ask, but why the hair?" Ghost stared at him again, one arched eyebrow beneath his mask. "No matter what you say, but your hair definitely doesn't belong in this line of work," Parker said, and Ghost shook his head, slightly thoughtful, finding the man's words amusing. "Because it annoys my boss," he replied, and Parker laughed, leaning his back against the metal wall of the helicopter. "That's a good reason," Parker said, resting his head and closing his eyes, relieved to be the only one out of that place. The helicopter suddenly started up, and Ghost removed his rifle from his back, leaving the gun at his side. Sighing, he stretched and tensing his muscles in an attempt to relax a little. He could go for another day or two on that mission, if he needed to, but he wouldn't mind a rest. A short rest, of course. Because of the time he had reached the city, he would still have work to do. Next to Falcone was Hunk, observing the man's situation. He would be fine, but they would hold off until they have reached the base, with better equipment to treat him. At a certain point, the mask agent received the news on the radio The signal had returned and now he had news outside world. He talked on the radio for a few moments until suddenly the air around him became a little colder. His body language stiffened and became tense. At the end of his radio conversation, he made his way over to Ghost, who although didn't seem to be paying any attention. He noticed a sudden change in his partner's behavior. "Ghost," he called out. His voice was serious, in which itself for no cause for concern, but it was strangely serious, and Ghost's sharp trained instincts screamed that something was wrong. This had to have been an incident. I asked to keep you under control. Despite the efforts of Alia and the team, due to the lack of equipment, your family's been kidnapped, Hunk said, and without realizing, Ghost held his breath. He knew the moment he noticed a sudden change in Hunk. The time itself seemed to have frozen. His fist tightened on the seat he was on. If it hadn't been for his mask, Hunk would have noticed the color fade from his face. His chest tightened as if a knife had been plunged into his heart, and the words he wanted to say that were stuck in the air. Unable to say anything, he lowered his head slightly, tilted his torso forward, and rested on his arms on his thighs. Just above his knees, his fists were clenched tightly. His mind raced with thousands of thoughts, his body tense with thousands of lived situations running vividly across his skin. For the first time in a long time, he felt a chilling wave of despair rise up inside him, taking over and threatening him down. "When?" he asked, and his voice was hoarse, and the words trembling cold, threatening whisper, demonstrating the real extent of the conflict in his body. 5 hours approximately, Hunk replied, noticing his partner's reaction, sympathizing him. Ghost's hands began to shake, and little by little, the excruciating feeling of despair gave way to anger. If it hadn't been for the glove, Hunk would have seen his knuckles turn white from the force. "Who?" Is his tone a little louder, more authoritative, accompanied by a hopeful sigh, a futile attempt to calm down. "The suspect is the same. The focus isn't on him. They're doing is that they can trace your family," Hunk said, and Ghost clucked his tongue in disgust. He could do nothing but wait. Not only that, he was still in the helicopter in full flight, because they didn't even find out where they have been taken. "Try not to do anything rash." That's all Hunk said before walking away. He didn't really have time to say or anything to say to Ghost, and even if he did, he knew that he wouldn't listen. He sympathized with his friend's anger and wanted something to be done. However, at the moment, unfortunately, they had bigger problems to solve. Getting up slowly when Hunk was focused on treating this man, he walked to the helicopter cabin, catching the pilot's eye, and he picked up a headset from the co-pilot's seat. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked, and Ghost looked at him with cold eyes. "When we land, leave the keys," he simply said, removing the headset and placing it on the co-helicopter's seat, waiting and walking away without letting the pilot ask any questions. The way back took some time, just a few hours for some, but long excruciating for others. Ghost couldn't wait for them to arrive soon. All the times during the journey, he didn't speak to anyone. He couldn't look at anyone. He didn't say a word or show reaction. He remained the same position for the whole time. When they had finally arrived at the BSAA base, he didn't even hear what the group around him were talking, or when Falcon thanked him for everything and apologized for being dead weight, or when Hunk called him off the helicopter. Nothing but just flashes, like the size of a presentation. He stood up and looked out of the helicopter. Chris and Jill were already far away, escorting Parker to the medical ward. Hunk was going with his men to treat Falcon, saying something over the radio, probably alerting Wesker and Walter that they had arrived. Ghost sighed heavily a few times and turned to walk to the helicopter cabin. Just as he asked, the pilot left the keys. Ghost stared up at the helicopter again, and in a matter of some time it was already taken off, ignoring any logical thought that crossed his mind. He could wait, but the time they would manage to track him down, they could be dead. Considering that Simons was the closest person and the most powerful man in the country, he would say that the chances of him being him were high, almost certain. Why would he wait if he could go and thank him and ask him in person? "Ghost, what are you doing?" He heard Hunk's voice through the communicator. No matter what his partner said, he wouldn't change his mind. "I won't wait. I'm going to ask the man personally, he said, now at a considerable height. Don't do something you might regret later. Wait, Hunk said, and Ghost snorted. Would you wait? Ghost asked, and he waited for an answer, which was slow in coming. This isn't about me, damn it. Agent, I understand you, but now is not the time to lose your head, Hunk replied. After a while, Ghost laughed with a certain contempt. That's what I thought, he said, changing the channel on his communicator. Elia, do you copy? Ghost asked, waiting for the woman's reply. Ghost, good to hear from you. Walter was with Hunk on the line just now and... Simon's location, he interrupted her with a cold voice, and the woman remained silent for brief moments, much to the agent's irritation. Ghost, we can't mobilize the resources to go after him. We're trying to trace your family, the woman said, and Ghost shook his head. But we don't have many resources. I'm not going to wait, he said. That's not the only problem. The kidnapping was very well carried out. They covered their tracks and used advanced devices. Whoever did it had control of all the cameras around, maybe even patrolled the whole block. If we had all of our equipment, that wouldn't be a problem. But believe me when I say there's almost nothing. Elia and Ghost snorted. It must have been Simon's location, he asked again, and his voice laden with a little bit more impatience. Ghost, listen. Simons has fled the complaint against the BSAA and has already attracted some attention. If you go after him now, rumors will start that it wasn't just a coincidence. After all, the BSAA could be hurt in this. Ghost took a deep breath again. Elia, Simon's location. Don't you think you could go after Simons and the others will be afraid you might get published your file to the world? They'll do anything to... Just shut the fuck up, he screamed at the top of his lungs. His patience now completely exhausted. His face, his body, his heart, everything contorted in pure rage. You're going to do your frickin' job, and I'm going to do mine. Now for the last frickin' time, give me Simon's location. The line went silent. The noise of the helicopter consumed the cabin. Only the sound of the agent's heavy breathing. Elia on the other end was shocked, a little surprised but frightened, and even offended. That was the first time he had shouted at her, or anyone from that organization. In all those years, for the first time, he heard his truly angry voice, and he couldn't help but feel a little threatened. He's going into town hall 2 hours together with the president. They've been using the device place for meetings since the White House was destroyed, Elia said, and that all Ghost needed to hear, before he changed the course of the helicopter. The vehicle was too big, so he would have to leave it somewhere outside. Near the military camp set up after the attack would be a good option, since no one would question a helicopter military in the vicinity. It would be a while before he reached downtown hall, but considering that Simon's there would be another 2 hours, he hoped that it would make it there in time, and especially was counting on arriving at night. The security would be tight, but the president would be there. In other words, getting in without being seen. Once inside would be easy. All he needed now was a car. The hours passed quickly, and the night came with the icy wind, and the heavy clouds could be seen over the horizon. Ghost landed on the roof of the nearby building and looked up at the town hall. In his hands, this hook shot he was now moving through the streets with the last hour. Outside the town hall was a mixture of shadowy nooks and areas dimly lit by street lamps. Raising his hook shot, he shot up the side of the town of the roof and let himself being pulled up there, rising with a certain grace to the spot, using the darkness of the night as a camouflage. There were a few black cars and vans parked around the place, as well as a high number of security guards around the inside. His eyes focused on the dead light sky ahead. With a quick but silent steps, he approached the skylight and opened with almost an audible creak, and the agent stepped gracefully through the skylight, landing in what appeared to be a small empty office. Silently he moved the doors and opened it, examining the corridor before starting to move. The sound of his boots, soft but not audible enough to attract the attention of the security guards patrolling the corridors. Moving quickly, Ghost arrived at the intersection. Glancing at the buildings displayed on the compact holographic device, on a quick analysis, he chose to move through the ventilation ducts, forcing his way through the bars after seeing that there were no security guards around. The cold metal path stretched out before him, and Ghost crept silently towards the room where the meetings were currently taking place. In the distance, he could hear muffled voices, snatches of the conversation. Apparently, it was not just an ordinary meeting of the National Security Advisor was supposed to be doing, plotting security plans and projects with the latest attack in mind, as well as reporting his latest work on the conjunction of TerraSave. Peering through the secret ventilation grill, Ghost identified the room below. It was dimly lit, with the occupants unaware of the shadowy figure watching them from above. There was Simons, sitting on the sofa in the opposite of the president, who was next to a blonde figure, his daughter. Funny, he didn't even know he could take his daughter to meetings. Was he planning for her to take this place? Doesn't matter. Among them were a table with a laptop and some other files scattered around. Joining them in the room were two members of the president's personal security team, highly trained agents. They accompanied him to each and every meeting. He would have to eliminate those two first, be quick enough so that neither of them fled the room, and eliminate the security guards behind that door. It seemed simple enough. From his tactical vest, he shot up the EMP device and pressed a button. The device emitted a strong electrical pulse. Through the communicators of the area were destroyed, interrupted, or damaged throughout the area. Great, no backup now. The light in the room went out, and it was that moment that Ghost climbed down from the ventilation duct. The sound of the grill falling to the ground startled the people inside, and at a great speed, Ghost ran up to the agents responsible for the president's security. At first, he landed a powerful punch to the agent's face, right on the chin, knocking him out immediately, turning to his body to take advantage of the momentum of his movement. He landed a back kick to the head of the second agent, sending him violently to the ground, and the agent quickly ran towards the entrance. The door was opened by security guards with flashlights illuminating the area. The first security guard was greeted with a strong kick to the chin. Second surprised and frightened and tried to react by raising his pistol. However, Ghost grabbed his forearm and punched him in the jaw, followed by a kick to the side of his leg, which sent him to his knees, and finally a knee to the face, knocking him out. The agent quickly turned around, and the room now illuminated by the dim light of the emergency light. His gun was pointed directly at the Simon's head, who, unlike the president, was standing around staring at him. His eyes stared at him with the intense heat, his once cold eyes burning with the intense blue glow, capable of consuming even the strongest of men. "What's the meaning of this?" Simons asked, trying to mask his fear with anger, trying to be something he wasn't, a fighter. Ghost approached with long, heavy strides, and in one strong movement, hit the man with a punch to the side, causing him to turn violently, and then grabbed Simons by the back of the head and threw him against the table, the thud startling the president and his daughter. "Where are they?" he said. His low but frightening voice pierced through the minds of the souls of everyone in the room. They had no idea how much he was holding back from the ripping Simon's head off with his bare hands. "What the hell are you talking about?" Simons was interrupted to another punch in the face, leaving him disoriented. "I don't have time for this shit," Ghost muttered, more to himself than Simons, and taking advantage of the fact that this man was dazed, he turned to him around, grabbed him by the arm, and in one precise movement broke it, grabbing Simons' mouth on the other hand, preventing him from screaming. The man in turn struggled violently, screamed and grunted with all of this, which was muffled by Ghost's strong grip on him. He wouldn't do anything. The agent was as many times stronger than him. "Where are they?" Ghost asked again, raising up his gun to the president when he saw him moved out of the corner of the eye. "If you stay right here, Mr. President, my problem is with you." Simons gasped as Ghost loosened his grip. "Why would you think I'd tell you, huh? And why would you think they're still alive? One word from me and they..." Ghost covered his mouth with his hand again, and with his knife cut two of the Simon's fingers. The man screamed and struggled even harder than before. His heart was beating harder and harder, and blood left his body, staining the gray carpet red. "You're going to tell me, whatever you like it or not. And trust me when I say that it's better for you that you're not dead, Ghost said again, letting go of the man who grunted and gasped loudly a few times. You think I'm afraid of you? Do you think threats will do any good? Ghost slowly crouched down, without taking his eyes off of Simon's, showing us National Security Advisor, the most dangerous thing that in the room, that was another agent from in front of him. You don't need to fear me for yourself, but who knows? Maybe you could fear me for the other people. What about your family? Simon's eyes widened slightly, his trembling hand clutching his wounded arm, his eyes staring with a certain disbelief and fear at the skull mask in front of him. What about your sweet Alice? Your wife goes in for a run every day at 6 in the morning, who occasionally goes to the gym with her neighbor, who leaves the house every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the afternoon for work and returns at 6. Ghost stood up slowly, starting to play with the bloody knife in his hands. His tone of voice, his look, his body language, he was serious. What about your dear Isaac, who leaves from school from 6 to noon, who goes out to play ball with his friends in the afternoon until he comes back before dark? Every Saturday he goes to his colleague Everett's house and they spend a day together. Don't you fear them? Simons breathed heavily, gritted his teeth and trembled at the threat, his face contorted with a mixture of fear, pain, and worry. You wouldn't do that. They had nothing to do with it. You don't kill innocent people, Simon said, and Ghost laughed scornfully, laughed debauchery, spitting in Simon's face, who felt cowed by the laughter. My family had nothing to do with it either. So don't you dare say I kill innocent people. Look into my eyes, Ghost said, crouching down again and moving closer, maintaining eye contact at all times. Without blinking, without looking away, his cold eyes seemed to freeze in Simon's place. Do you really want to find out? Simon swallowed some saliva, his body even shakier than before, the pain forgotten now, and the fear taking over his body, being his thoughts. He found himself tied down, and his pride was desperately trying to get back on its feet. Would that be the full point of it all, huh? To go after innocent people? A child? You're no better than me. You're no better than Umbrella or Wesker. You're just like every terrorist who has set foot in this earth. Simon spat out those words, desperately trying to cause some damage, then to hit the agent in some way. However, the worst thing he could happen did happen. Ghost's eyes remained the same, showing no reaction. I never said I was better than them, or you. You're right. But there is one thing that makes me different. Ghost held up just one finger. I could be worse than all of you. So if you want to see your family alive, if you want something good for the first time in your pitiful life, do as I say. For the last time, where are they? Ghost asked for the last time, feeling that his last remains of patience was running out. Simons made an expression of defeat, his body protesting against his stubborn mind, and his mind might try and trick him, but his body wouldn't lie. He was afraid. He was frightened and full of terror. For the first time in a long time, he gave up. They're in a facility, 37 kilometers from Pittsburgh. It's my site. It's used as a security research center. They're alive. The men aren't mine. They're mercenaries. I hired in conjunction with the vice president of Nigeria and South Africa, he confessed, and Ghost clicked his tongue, shaking his head slightly. Good choice, Ghost said, putting his knife back in the sheath, grabbing Simons once again by the back of his neck. Now, I'm not going to kill you. The words surprised the man, who widened his eyes. You're more useful when you're alive. Listen carefully. Tomorrow, before the end of the day, you're going to reveal all your corrupt friends. Everyone who took part in hiring Ida Wong. Everyone who connected to the black market. Everyone that you've known have been involved with. All the files, illegal operations, everything. I don't care how you do it. Internet, television, fuck it. Just do it. But don't say anything about yourself. Keep your secrets a secret. And these days from now on, at 10 o'clock at night sharp, I'm going to find you, Ghost said, standing up slowly as he faced the man on the ground. Simon, still panting, nodded, lowering his gaze, relieved and thinking any that being that would listen that he was still alive. Ghost's angry eyes rose up to the president and his offspring. The man hugged the girl, who couldn't help but face the situation head on, despite her fear. "Be very careful who you trust, President Graham," Ghost said, and the man stared at him with big frightened eyes. "One mistake, and I'll come after you, and I'll make you remember that there are much bigger people than you are out there," Ghost said, turning and walking out of the place, leaving the shield, pushing his body towards his attacker. The shots were probably heard throughout the facility, meaning there was no point on being stealthy. Raising his Desert Eagle, he fired in the direction of the second mercenary, hitting him square in the head, practically exploding his skull. The emergency light came on, and the last two mercenaries focused their eyes on the agent. The third mercenary raised his rifle in his direction, only to be hit by the Desert Eagle shots, one in the neck and the other one in the side of his head. The last mercenary advanced towards Ghost, trying to stop him from raising his Desert Eagle. Ghost grunted slightly as he felt his arm being grabbed, and his eyes widened slightly as she saw the man try to punch him in the face. The agent quickly ducked and countered with a punch to the stomach, causing the man to bend over from the force of the blow. With his knife, the agent still slits the mercenary's throat in a deep cut, causing a large amount of blood to spew from the wound. The mercenary's body fell to the ground and lay motionless in a pool of blood. The agent sighed heavily and put his knife back in the sheath, and finally faced the free-bound people. He swallowed some saliva. It had been so long since he did it at the same time. They hadn't changed so much. They were so similar. His father was still the same, despite looking a little bit more worried. These years hadn't treated him badly. His hair was still the same light color, despite the gray was now filled with sides. His mother was still the same. Her hair was shorter than he remembered. There were a few more wrinkles on her face. Her eyes were a little deeper, just like his father's. But it was just his sister who had changed a moment. She had grown a lot in those years. Perhaps she was the same height as her father. Her hair was longer and her features were more mature. She had become a beautiful woman. The thing that bothered him the most wasn't the gags of their mouths, or the ropes that tied them to those chairs. What bothered them the most were their eyes, full of fear, terrified, their desperate features looking at him as if they were truly the devil himself. Well, at least they didn't look hurt. He approached with some hesitation, picking up his knife again, trying to ignore the pain in his chest when he saw them cowering on the chair. "I came to help you," he said quietly, cutting the ropes that bound his father, then the thing to do, moving the same to his mother, and finally his sister. He stowed his blade in the sheath and his shoulder and checked on the corridor leading to the room they were in, avoid looking at them for too long. "I hope you can move. We need to go. Stay behind me and stay calm. I promise I'll get you out of here," he said, turning and looking at them over his shoulder, crouching down as he picked up the rifle from one of the mercenaries on the ground, held it towards his father. He wasn't a cop, nor did he have the military training, but he did know how to shoot a gun. Ever since they were rescued decades ago, he made a point on learning how to shoot and arm himself with different types of weapons. "What the fuck is going on?" his father asked. Ghost gritted his teeth, controlling his feelings as his body began to shiver. It had been so long since he heard his voice. "I'll explain later," he said, and his father took the rifle from his hand. He would never let anything happen to them while he was there, but he felt a little more at ease with them armed. And with that in mind, he advanced down the corridor, hearing the footsteps of the mercenaries approaching ahead.